Well, welcome to class, everyone. Let me just get everyone on here. Okay. Well, first off, thanks for being flexible with me. I've trying to trying to balance everything out. Oh, there you go. That's a two-headed monster right there. Um, but I've been trying to keep up with, giving you meaningful work, but not giving you too much busy work. So, but we do need to kind of get back after it. I look forward to being back in class next week and being able to kind of dig in a little better. But for today, our this week's chapter is about organizational structure. So what I want to do is go around the room real quick and just hear from you. What's the largest organization you've ever worked for? Okay, what is it? And then number two, in the organizational structure, what's the top level person that you've personally been connected to in that organization? So the largest organization you ever worked for, and then how high up the organization were you personally connected to a leader? Like, were you friends with the CEO? Are you related to the president, the pastor, whatever? Or did you only work with the middle level manager or shift manager? So what's the largest organization you ever worked for? And then what's the highest level of leader you've personally been connected to? We'll start with Alyssa.
I guess the biggest I've ever worked for would be Chick-fil-A, I guess. And then the highest up, I've worked pretty closely with the owner because he's pretty interactive with all of his employees and he does pretty much everything. So
Yeah.
um, we have pretty good work employer-employer relationships with him.
Yeah. Is there a lot of, is he a pretty approachable owner as far as like you don't feel intimidated?
I feel like he's kind of intimidating like the first couple times just because like he's the owner. Um, but he like once you kind of get used to working there and like you know him, I mean, I feel pretty comfortable asking him questions about things and I know like if there was ever a problem or if, I had any suggestions or thoughts or I could probably go and talk to him about anything like that and he would be pretty open with it. So, yeah,
Yeah.
he's good to work for.
All right. Noah, what's the largest organization you've worked for?
It would either be Hy-Vee or Monsanto. I think Hy-Vee is probably bigger. Um, and the highest uh, person I met or interacted with was the store manager, um, Mike Blunk. Uh, it's Jason Blunk's dad, if any of you know him. Jason Blunk is the youth pastor at Ankeny Baptist. Um, but yeah, he was the one that hired me, and so I'd see him around the store every now and then.
Yeah.
He was a really nice guy.
Did he go by Mike or Mr. Blunk?
Mr. Blunk for me,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, I assume most people call him Mr. Blunk.
Yeah.
Unless I don't know. I wasn't really close with them.
Yeah. All right. Jared Ball, what's the largest organization you've worked for?
Well, I worked for Lifeway for it panned out to be 3 weeks technically, because a position that I was wanting at my school opened up, and so I was able to go and take that one. So I'm just going to go with my high school back home. It's a school of 1,000 students, and it's also a ministry of my church. And there at the high school, I mean, since it's my church and I've been going there for some time, I know everybody,
Mm-hmm.
president, of course, the pastor, and I'm pretty well connected with most all the teachers there and administrators. So it's been a blessing for me to have such close connections with everybody that I've worked for and then am friends with, and it's been great.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Emmy, what's the biggest organization you've worked for?
I think the biggest organization I worked for would be Farm and Fleet. So that's pretty much as big as it gets in where I'm from. But I worked closely with the store manager there, with a lot of projects and stuff, especially in my department and like just the soft lines department in general. But I've worked not really closely, but a little bit with our regional manager as well. He stops in sometimes, and he would just help us with some projects and moving things out of the warehouse and everything, just moving stuff around for the store. So that's the closest person I probably would have worked with. The owner doesn't usually come to the stores unless it's like a new store or a big store.
Yeah.
So that's probably the regional manager is as big as I've gotten.
Is the regional manager, was that like a first name basis thing, or is it like a Mr. whatever?
Kind of, yeah. Everyone calls him Paul K. So because there was another Paul in the company, so we all called him Paul K. So it's just kind of like he didn't really want to be called, I don't even know his last name, but he didn't want to be called Mr. something. He just wanted to be called Paul. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, Rebecca.
So the biggest I've worked for is probably Kohl's, but that's what Caitlin's gonna say. So I'll do something different. I worked at Bath and Body Works, and the district manager would come in all the time, and I was able to work with her a couple times. So that's the biggest.
Was she a first name basis person?
No, not really.
Yeah. So you had to call her Mrs. whatever, and yeah.
I should have to talk to her though.
All right, Kaylin, what about you?
Yeah, probably Kohl's, and the highest person I've talked to would be the person over the whole store here in Ankeny, Corey. So.
Yep. Intimidating at all, or an approachable person?
I mean, he scares me a little bit, but he's very nice. So like, I don't know.
Is it the kind of person you feel like you could go to if you had a big problem?
Yeah, he's approachable in that way. So.
All right. Okay, Max, what about you?
I would say either Lomar or working for Faith, because as an RA, I'm employed by Student Life. I don't know which one is bigger, but for Lomar, the highest person I interacted with was like a shift manager or the hiring manager. And then for here, obviously the highest person I interact with is P. Tilly.
Yeah. Yeah. So pretty easy to interact with.
Yeah.
Not that intimidating. Abigail, what about you?
I worked at the YMCA a couple summers ago. That's probably the biggest corporation that I worked for. And the highest up that I really talked to was our branch's manager.
Yeah. Is that the kind of person that was directly involved? Like you could just go talk to them anytime, or was there any intimidation at all?
Not at all. She was super, super sweet, very good with the kids, very good with us as employees, interacted with everybody. She was phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as everyone pretty much shared, it sounds like most of us have had very positive experiences with higher level organizational leaders, no matter how big the organization. I think what it communicates is, first off, that you don't have to create this huge wall of intimidation to be a leader in a large organization. You can be approachable. Being approachable is actually a great quality. Now, culturally, here in the West, we really value that. So we like people to be a little more normal, a little more approachable, things like that. Other cultures don't necessarily respect that. So if you were to go to Japan, that approachability might not be there. And so it's not necessarily right or wrong. It's just the way it is in our culture. So organizational structure, as you guys are going through all your homework assignments and stuff, you're going to get a whole load of information about organizational structure. And all it is just giving you a quick snapshot of how organizations are put together. So what I want to do is, instead of going through a bunch of PowerPoint slides today, I just want to show 2 short videos. And I wanted to experiment because I sat in on a Zoom call recently where instead of the host sharing the video and possibly it getting all jittery and everything, the host in the Zoom call I was in dropped the link in the chat. So if you look in your chat window right now, you'll see 2 different links. I'd like you, this is what you can do is you can stop your video and mute your microphone, and then you can click on, I just want you to first watch the one that says, what is organizational structure? And then what that'll do is then you're just directly linking to that YouTube video instead of it going through my Zoom and everything. And I think it's a little better chance that we're, here, I'll repost it, because you know what happened is, because I posted it before everyone had joined, so you only see things, I think, if you were already on. So I'll repost it into the chat here real quick for you. All right, you guys see that? Just popped up? Okay. So what I'd like you to do is stop your video, mute your microphone. This is, less, I think 5-minute video, whatever, and then we'll all come back together and discuss this video, okay? So that's a super simple concept, right? Organizations are literally the term organized. So they have to have a structure. They have to be built a certain way so that they function. And what would you say has been one of the largest influences on the way businesses are organized over the years, especially here in America? What would you say are some of the things that are out there that have influenced the way organizations have come to be structured?
I think one of the ways you said, I know we've mentioned it earlier, but entrepreneurship is a big thing. And so just being able to have the flexibility, I know like a lot of up and coming entrepreneurs and like more our generation, we like to have the flexibility of working from home and making our own hours, but also having a businesses have been like influenced by how they're structured based on being able to be flexible for their employees and give them hours and ways they can work from home or from wherever instead of always having to come into the office for like a 9-to-5 job.
Absolutely. I think COVID has made that even more a reality, right? So before, companies thought that, hey, if we're going to have a big business, we need to build a $1 million building and put 100 offices in there, and everyone has to be here from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then now with COVID, it's kind of proving that that might not always be the case. Now there are some businesses, brick and mortar stores and things like that, where you do have to have, a presence, but some office jobs, you literally don't have to be in an office anymore. So what else do you think has influenced the way organizations are structured?
I think one thing is the internet. That's kind of restructured a lot of things, because you can get education online. That's a big part of it. Like you can get training while you're working at your job. Also, internet has kind of shifted how responsibilities are handled, because people can do a lot more things on the internet at the same time. So job descriptions and jobs that people have are more fluid than they were previously. And kind of building on what Alyssa said, you can do that from anywhere. And so that really just kind of shifts how the structure of the company is handled.
Yeah. What else? Let me ask it this way. Why is it that almost all big companies have the same basic positions in place? They all seem to have a president. They all seem to have a CEO, a CFO, a COO, director of HR. Where does all that come from, do you think? And there's probably a lot of different answers to this. So,
which one? I'll probably go with the most obvious and say trial and error, because if we're going to have to go back a little ways to some of these, and there are some structures that are carried into organizations and businesses today that were established back, at the very beginning. even talking biblical times. So I would say that to have the positions that we do today, some were instituted because of the modern era and having to do with internet technology, different aspects of, an evolving business. But I would say largely it's other organizations trying things out, them working and being successful, networking, or other companies doing research, and then implementing them themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else want to comment on that? What do you think? Why is it that so many organizations have the same positions? I mean, there's so much creativity and so much diversity in different kinds of companies, yet most companies seem to break down to the same exact basic structure.
Maybe could one of the reasons be because different people have different perspectives and different opinions and like different ways of handling things. So if you have the same people, like not the same people, but I mean people in the same type of positions, having the same type of responsibilities, they might bring different insight and different perspectives and ideas to the table than somebody else that's doing the same thing might. So it might help them be able to, I don't know, create something a little bit better than they would have had they just had one person working on something.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else have any comments on that? So if you were to go back in history to 2,000 years ago, when the Roman Empire was at its peak, you would find that the Roman Empire had structured organizationally things a certain way that just seemed to work. And they probably got their ideas from, an empire before them and then before them. And you can go all the way back into the Old Testament and see how God told Moses to organize the children of Israel. There are just some things about human nature and the way groups of people need to be organized that's just in our DNA. And so some things do go all the way back. But there are some things that definitely in the modern era have influenced the way organizations are structured up to a certain point. So if you think about big events in history, like World War II. So World War I, World War II, you had millions of men and some women, not as many women as men, of course, went off and served in the United States military and were subject to military structure, where you have a general, and under the general you have a couple colonels, and under the colonels you have a couple majors, and under the majors you have, captains, and then lieutenants, and then sergeants, and so there was this structure, and so millions of young people were exposed to that kind of structure, and no one said, "Oh, do you like this structure?" They just said, "This is the structure that makes the military work." Well, they bring that experience back with them, and then they come back and they start up businesses and they structure them in a very similar way. Even ministries copy some similar, hierarchical structure from the military. And so that was a big influence for years and years. Sports teams, the way sports teams are organized, a lot of times when people come out of the sports world and they go into like a business world or leading an organization, they might bring over ideas that they got from being part of a effective sports organization, right? So they even use some of the same terminology, and they'll use some of the same tactics and things like that when they come up with this structure for the organization. I think what you guys are going to see moving forward is organizations like Google and Amazon and Walmart, companies like that. You're going to see how they're organized, and you're going to see the organizations of the next generation kind of all basing their structure on clever things that those organizations have done, because people want to basically repeat success. So and there are some things that just seem to work out. So okay, so now let's talk about this. We all are part of the faith organization, so we can observe the way faith is structured and where we interact with it. You interact with it as a student. You might also interact with faith as a part-time worker. I interact with faith as a employee, full-time employee. So let's talk about the organizational structure of faith, just so we can kind of think through here. So let's. I'll write it out here. I'm gonna just go around the room and ask you. I'll start down at the bottom here with Kaylin. So, Kaylin, who is at the very top of the Faith Baptist Bible College organization, as you understand it?
This is a trick. The president.
President. So, what's the president's role, Kaylin?
Run the college.
Okay. So let me ask you then. It's not really a trick question, but so where does the president get his authority to run the college?
That's a good question. So possibly is there a board of people or something like that?
Yes, there is. So there's actually a board that's over the president. So although the president is the acting everyday decision maker leader, he's not the ultimate authority at the college. The highest level of authority at our college is the board. And so that's something that you don't think of, normally, because the board's only around twice a year, as far as like coming and visiting the campus and things like that. So you have the board and then the president. Okay, so let's bounce around here. Oh, well, we'll go through. Rebecca, so under the president, who would you say is the next person underneath the president as far as running the college?
Is it Mark Davis? Is he like the vice president or something like that?
He is a vice president. He's vice president of enrollment. Yeah. So he's one of the vice presidents. So he's at a high level of leadership for sure. So Abigail, who else would be underneath the president in that next level of leadership?
I forget his name, but I know we have a CFO. I've been over to his house. I just don't remember his name.
So Mr. Paul Bray is the CFO. So he chief financial officer. So which gives him a lot of authority, right? Because the school cannot function without money, and so he has the ability to say yes and no to almost all the financial decisions. And so in a way, everything you do goes through him. But Mark Davis, without students, you wouldn't have a college either. So he has very high level of leadership. Emmy, who else is at a high level of leadership underneath the president?
Dr. Heron would be, since he's the vice president.
Yes. So actually, Dr. Heron is above all the other vice presidents. So he's the executive vice president. So you have Jim Tillotson as the president, and then you have a layer of vice presidents underneath, but you need one head of all the vice presidents. And that the reason that exists is so that if Dr. Tillotson's not there, you have someone that can fill his role. If everyone's a total peer where everyone's exactly equal, then you might never be able to get decisions made, and there isn't one person that's the final decision maker. So it's actually the board, the president, the executive vice president, and then all these other vice presidents. So the CFO is a vice president. Mark Davis is a vice president. Noah, who else do you think is in a high level of leadership at Faith?
Isn't Ken Rathbun like what would you call it? Like he sets the like he's kind of over the professors and stuff.
Yes, he is the academic vice president.
Academic advisor, that's what it is.
Yeah, and that's actually, so if you look at who's in charge of the most full-time employees, Dr. Rathbun. He's over everything that has to do with education. So he's not over the money and he's not over the students, but he is over everything academic, which involves all the faculty and staff. And so he is one of those top level leaders right underneath Dr. Heron. All right, Max, who else is at a top level?
I think of Brandon Fritz. He's Dean of Students.
All right. So Brandon Fritz is one level below the vice presidents. So he's not a vice president. So he's not at that ad council level, which is what they call all those people at the vice president level. So he'd be one level down. I believe he works underneath. He might work under Mark Davis, or he might work as kind of like a little offshoot of Dr. Heron. I can't remember what the structure is there, but sometimes you might have one person that is inhabiting a role like Dr. Heron, and so you got vice presidents that are under him, but he might also have a few departments that work under him, because I think athletics also is under him now too. So, all right, Abigail, who else?
I'm drawing a blank. I don't know.
Where does Terry Waltersdorf fit into the organizational structure of the college?
I mean, he's the Title IX investigator, so that gives him some level of authority, and then he's also head of dining services.
So he has two roles, right? So the Title IX is a small role, but it's an important role. It's kind of almost like a side job, right? And his main job being the director of dining services, that makes him a department head. So he's the head of probably the second largest revenue generating department on campus. So, all right, Emmy, who else is in a high level of leadership at Faith, and what do they do?
Probably Brian Fincham, since he's the athletic director, so he oversees all the athletics and everything that has to do with that.
Yep. And he, as I said earlier, he just this year started reporting directly to Dr. Heron. So it doesn't mean that he outranks Terry Waltersdorf just because he reports directly to the executive vice president, but it does mean that his position, he has less layers of leaders between him and the top, just because of the way our organization's structured. But yeah, that's a department head also. So Jared Ball, who else is in a high level of leadership at the college?
Don't hate on me for the pronunciation, but I would say our esteemed Mr. Dan Buchny.
Buchny.
Muleneer. Yeah. He is our vice president for advancement, graduate of Mankato State College. And you can call him at 515-612-4067.
Okay. All right. Hey, I didn't tell you couldn't look on the website. So yeah, he's also at the ad council level. So here's the interesting thing about Mr. Buchny. Nobody works for him, and he doesn't even have an office on campus. But his role, he's at the same level hierarchy-wise as Dr. Rathbun, who is, in charge of every single full-time teaching employee. So did I ask everyone? Some of the faces bounced around. Alyssa, did you give one already?
No, I didn't.
All right. Well, give me one. What's another high-ranking person at Faith?
Would Faith Taylor be one as the Title IX coordinator?
She has a high-ranking position. Now, if you were to map this whole thing out, she would kind of be in the middle of the organization, because she's not in charge of very many people, like nobody. But she has a position that does give her a special office and a special responsibility. So now I guess this proves the point. I think I got everyone right. Everyone was able to contribute. When you have a big, complicated organization, even though you live in it every day and most of these people, sometimes it's not real clear who's in charge of whom, or who's at the higher level. So now if I was to ask the question a different way, if I was to say who's the most influential person at the college, well, you might have come up with a whole different answer. You might not have said the people that are in the hierarchy. You might say someone that has personally influenced you, or someone that personally the decisions they make affect your life the most, or maybe they're a fan favorite amongst the students. So it's not just about where someone is on the organizational chart. Obviously, they also can have great influence even if they're not a high level leader. Brandon Fritz would be like that, right? So Brandon Fritz, Mrs. Capon, they might not be at the top level of leadership as far as pay goes, or they don't go to the ad council meetings. But when it comes to influencing the college, they have a high level of influence. And so It just kind of shows you that organizations have a structure, and it's important for an organization to clearly communicate the structure so that people that work in it don't have confusion. What happens, let me just open it up here. What happens when an organization's structure is not real clear? What happens, or what are some of the potential things that can happen to the employees if an organization's structure isn't clear?
Communication gets really messed up.
Like in what way?
People that are on the lower tiers of the organization don't know who to take questions and concerns to, don't know don't know who to take questions and concerns to, and then higher tiers are confused as to, well, who's supposed to be communicating what to whom, and trying to figure all of that out, and communication just gets really wacky.
Yeah. So it's just natural. People have questions that they need answered, and so they'll go to the person that they think will answer the question. And if there's no clear, there's no clear chart of like who's in charge of what, then what happens is the people who are really good and have an open door policy, they're just getting bombarded all the time with questions that sometimes have nothing to do with their department. And then you have, excuse me, you have other people who are sitting there wondering, why is no one coming asking them anything? And so it's just a lot of times just a lack of clarity. What about any other problems that could arise from an organization not having a real clearly communicated structural layout for people?
I can think of just interdepartmental quarrels, just because nobody knows what their defined roles are.
Yeah.
So if somebody has a project and they think that they have the jurisdiction to work in this area, but they don't, or they don't think that someone else does and they're working in their area or something like that.
Yeah, I think the word jurisdiction is a good word, Max, because we're not talking about, it doesn't have to be pride or people being arrogant. It's just when two people both think that something is their job and they're both going to go do it, you're going to have some friction because now their jurisdiction is overlapping. Or even worse, when two people don't think something's their job and so nobody does it. And I'd say that's probably even more dangerous in an organization, things not happening at all because of a lack of structural clarity. So great. So when you join an organization in leadership, and I was going to have you watch this other video, but I think I'm going to throw that into the discussion and have you watch it on your own. When you join an organization, most likely you're going to join at a low level, and not low like unimportant, but just when you draw it out on the whiteboard, you're going to be towards the bottom of the pyramid, right? And you're going to have a boss, and you're going to have a boss's boss, and your boss's boss's boss. And you might have a lot of layers between yourself and the very top decision makers. So you have a responsibility to manage yourself and your roles and functions and things in the very best way you can, so you can be as effective and as have a great testimony and things like that. If you work at Kohl's, a couple shifts a week, they're not going to come to you and treat you the way they would treat the regional manager. You just don't have that level of responsibility. But the department you do work in, you definitely can have a good testimony by working really hard and doing your part and maybe going above and beyond. You could really have a big influence for not even being at a high level in the organizational structure. But let's say that you graduate from college and you're like, I like working for Kohl's. This is a career thing for me, and you decide to stay there. Well, then what you'll find is you'll start getting moved up in the structure. So when you're at an entry-level position, where you fit in the structure might not be a big deal to you. You might just be doing something because it's a job and you're just trying to work. But when you start looking at career decisions and long-term things, you start looking at, okay, so where do I fit into this structure long-term, and what's my opportunity to move up in the structure if you want to move up? So I look at things that way. I like knowing where I fit in the structure, and I want to know, do I have opportunity to move up in the structure so I can have more influence, so I can lead more people, so I can do more, more cool stuff and accomplish more things. So yeah, so that's how organizational structures work. It's not rocket science necessarily, but what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to wrap it up a couple minutes early here. I'm going to drop this link to this other video in a discussion on Canvas. And I just want you to watch it on your own, and then you'll leave a comment on it, and then we'll touch on it on Friday's class. Okay? Any questions before we go? All right. Okay. Well, thank you guys very much, and thanks for